Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. I did say if there was enough to warrant a second video, I would try to do one this week. And do you know what? I think there was enough stuff to go with. We've had recruitment team changes, of which I've kind of been delving into quite a bit today to try and get to the bottom of little bits and pieces that are going to change ahead of the January transfer window. We had a really good Ange Postecoglou press conference where bizarrely he started speaking about my holiday at the start of it. And of course, you guys and girls put your questions into the comments below. So I've got a fair few of those that I can kind of work through as well. So I thought, why not? Why not have a little sit down on my Friday night and talk all things Tottenham Hotspur? Let's start off with the recruitment department, because for me, that's some really interesting stuff going on there. It's going to be a different kind of Spurs recruitment approach to what we've been used to. You'll have heard me say in the past, certainly the recent past, about how they're going to switch to a more data-driven, analytics-based form of transfer dealing. And I think that suits the Postecoglou era perfectly, because ultimately he has a very set style of play, a very set kind of player he requires. And the system, it has all these different kind of cogs in the machine that it requires. And I think looking at data, and it's something that Postecoglou himself's really interested in as well, it's going to find you the best parts for the machine, I think, rather than just going off hunches and going off names and things like that. It's look, no one's going to be a better judge of the Postecoglou system and who fits it better than Ange Postecoglou himself. But what I think started to work this summer, and we've seen the fruit of it already with some of the transfers that were made, was that a lot of it, he asked them to come away and give him kind of evidence, research-based stuff, stats, data, really to drive it. And then he would look at their suggestions and he would make his decision based on that. He would speak to players. Vicario, a great example. Someone that they really liked at the club, and they came back with all the data to suggest that he would be not only terrific at all of the stuff with his hands that you're required to do as a goalkeeper, but also the stuff with his feet, his quick thinking in terms of starting attacks, whether it's with his feet or his hands, and various kind of aspects. And they were able to do that. He had a chat with Vicario, who he calls Vic, and he loved him. And he ticked a lot of the boxes for him in terms of being a fighter and things like that. So that's the model they're going to go for now. And it's the kind of model that has served the likes of Brentford and Brentford very well. I can already hear some of you going, well, Spurs want to be bigger than Brentford and Brentford. And I understand that. And we're going to explain exactly what that means as I'm kind of going to work my way down to that. It doesn't mean that Spurs are going to operate like them. It's that they're going to incorporate some of the good things they do into their existing structure. So, of course, we know that Johan Lang was coming in as technical director. He began work on Wednesday, the Dane, coming in from obviously having been at Aston Villa, performing a similar role until he was slightly marginalised with the changes that happened there in the last year or so. He became more to do with their global kind of brand, as it were. So he's come in. He started on Wednesday. Asked Ange about him. They've already had a little chat. I've got a quote coming up for you in a little bit about that. And not only that, he is now being joined next week by a member of his team there, who Spurs staff know very well, a certain Rob McKenzie, who's coming in as the new Tottenham Hotspur chief scout. So we're getting all the exciting changes on the pitch, and it kind of feels now like Scott Munn has gone in there and is starting to, I wouldn't say rip things up, but has spent enough time in there now knowing exactly what is needed and addressing that. And that's why we've seen these two big, quite high-profile changes behind the scenes. Obviously, Leonardo Gabbanini heading out the door as chief scout, replaced by Rob McKenzie, and obviously Johan Lang operating as the new technical director between Munn and McKenzie. So McKenzie's only 38 years old. He's very highly respected in the game. He was at Spurs for about 19 months, I think it was, in the 2015-16 season, when he had the title back then of Head of Player Identification. He was then snapped up by Derby, but he didn't actually stay there very long. And he went another route, and then he ended up going to various kind of jobs that we're going to talk about. His background, McKenzie, is very much analytics, like we say, that data side, which Lang is obsessed with himself. So they worked together for a while at Villa, and they're going to bring that kind of relationship into the world of Tottenham Hotspur. Before he came to Spurs, McKenzie was at Leicester City. He was there for about 5.5 years. He was about 2 years as a first-team performance analyst. And then he switched into the scouting department, where he was there for about 3.5 years, I think it was, working under Steve Walsh. He was technically, his title was Head of Technical Scouting. And pretty much he, working with Steve Walsh and obviously the recruitment team, overhauled the Leicester squad and built the squad that would become the title-winning one. You know, we know who they pipped to that title in 2016. And ironically, McKenzie had made the switch across to Tottenham, and he'd come across to Tottenham as the Leicester squad that he helped build with Steve Walsh won the title. It's the way things work, of course. So if you want to kind of see some of the evidence of the players that McKenzie had a part in unearthing, certain Riyad Mahrez, £500,000 from Le Havre. He was brought in. They were in the second division of French football at the time. He went across to France to scout him with Walsh, and obviously lots of prep work as well to see whether he would fit into the Premier League and to fit into what Leicester were doing. So obviously Mahrez signed for $500,000, ended up going for, 40, 50, 60? I think it was more than that. I can't remember what it was. He went to City, but a huge profit. He was one player. N'Golo Conte as well, another player that team brought in from Caen. Is it Kane? I can never remember how you pronounce it. Caen. Obviously, a big step up for him, but he was able to make it. McKenzie went to scout Jamie Vardy at Fleetwood as well. That was another one that he went to look at. Again, you've always got to be very wary in the scouting world. Very few of them will claim one as their own. They always see it as quite a collaborative process. Like one scout will go and look at it, they'll give recommendations. Another scout will then check on that. So they're all kind of part of the process. Who else do you look at? Anthony Knockhart was another one. He came across from Guingamp. I'm so bad at pronunciations. Obviously, probably better known for his time at Brighton, I'd say, than Leicester. But obviously, he brought him across to English football. Knockhart. Esteban Cambiasso, more obviously established, experienced player. But from what I understand, McKenzie did a lot of the groundwork in seeing whether he would be able to transfer his skills to the Premier League and Leicester, which he did for that season. He was formerly Real Madrid, wasn't he, as well, Cambiasso? So less of an unknown quantity in a lower league, but more about adaptation, how does he fit the system. So that's just a few of the kind of, just to give you a glimpse into some of the moves that were made at Leicester. And obviously we know Villa's recruitment has been pretty good in recent years as well on the whole, which has kind of given them the foundation of where they are at now. And yeah, I've been asking around various people today about McKenzie, people within Spurs, people outside Spurs, agents, people that might have dealt with him. And honestly, it was universal praise, really. Everyone I spoke to gave a good account of him. Some of the things that were said, like very good, very thorough. Someone that doesn't suffer fools gladly, someone told me as well, which will fit in nicely with Postecoglou. Very similar kind of, I think they're both kind of guys that look for maximum efficiency. There's no wastage, like no wasting time talking rubbish or whatever. They probably wouldn't like these videos. But yeah, he's it kind of is seen as a little bit of a, what's the best word? Not say coup, but a bit of people are impressed, I think, that Spurs have managed to get him back to them. Bearing in mind he was head of recruitment at Villa, and he's coming to Spurs as chief scout. Maybe title-wise, is that slightly below it? I don't know. Titles now are a bit of a kind of a myth, isn't it? It's just whatever they're not a myth, they exist, but they are. They can be different in different clubs and mean different things. You can be a higher standard than someone else at a different thing. But yeah, it seems to be a generally people are impressed that Spurs have got him back as they think he can do great work back at Spurs again. And of course, you also have the bonus that he knows Spurs inside out. He spent almost 2 years at the club. he knows what the club's all about. He knows what Daniel Levy as a chairman's all about. He knows the parameters and also the strengths that the club bring. And, you know, Villa obviously doing very well, but probably you've got a bigger pool of players that you could probably go for as well when you're at Spurs. Obviously, a growing and big brand, and hopefully even bigger with what's happening this season. But yeah, it's really interesting as well if you look at what Scott Munn's done in quite a short space of time. He's come in, looked exactly what needed to be changed, and from what I can understand, they've identified the fact that while Fabio Paratici was, let's be honest, one of the best at acquiring high-end talent is probably the best way to put it, and that includes young players. And by that I mean, you know, he would go in and he would bring to Spurs the likes of Pat Matasar, Destiny Udogie, Brian Hill, Christian Romero, a little bit older and more expensive, but of that ilk. These young players who were very well known, very much wanted by a lot of the top clubs, but he has this ability to go in there, strike a really good deal and get them to Spurs. So that's a massive thing, and we're seeing the fruits of that now. But what I would say is they were all known quantities. And while it was a coup that they were signed, and that's maybe the main thing you could say, it was a coup that they were signed because of the competition and everyone was aware of them and how good they could potentially be. But what Spurs maybe were struggling with underneath that was having a recruitment team that maybe it could unearth those young gems that, like I say, we'll go back to the Brighton and Brentford stuff of going for players. Like, you know, you talk about Mahrez playing in the second division of French football, and you talk about just bringing these players across. And it's something that Postecoglou has a history of himself of kind of doing and bringing. You know, we've seen with some of the Japanese players at Celtic, bringing them across, and what an amazing success they've been. And that's what I think Scott Munn appears to be doing in bringing in Lang and McKenzie in this new... It's not new in the world of football, but for Spurs it's steering it in the right direction of this more research and database stuff, which is going to unearth these gems that the competition aren't even aware of. And will be kicking their heels when, like everyone is, when they look at, you know, Brighton signing players that then Chelsea want to buy for 100, 120 million or whatever, and they think, oh, why don't we bring in those kind of players? And that's exactly, I think, where Spurs felt they were maybe not at the level that some of these other clubs had been. And yeah, that's what this new duo will bring, hopefully, to the club. They've got a couple of months, obviously, to prepare for the January window. That's great. A bit of early thinking by Spurs, so they're in place now, rather than people with long kind of gardening leave that they've had to wait for. They're both, you know, by next week will both be in place. Lang's in place now, and you might be thinking, oh, McKenzie worked with Lang, so obviously Lang was the one that would have said, oh yeah, I want him in. There was an element of that, but apparently he was someone at the Spurs kind of higher ups, or certainly people within the club, had a lot of time and appreciation for, and was a name that they were looking to bring in anyway. Lang obviously more than happy to reunite with him again because of their relationship, and lo and behold, here we are. They're both at the club, having worked, you know, spells together at Villa. And yeah, I mean, it was 3 years. I was just looking at my notes there. McKenzie was 3 years as Villa's head of recruitment. And he's not only kind of built his career on unearthing kind of young players or talents that are a bit older that can transfer across to the Premier League, but he's also very good, I think, at, from what I understand, at fully scouting players and briefing managers on which players will and won't fit their system. Certainly some of the agents that I spoke to had kind of one thing that gripe they had was that when they were trying to move on a player maybe to another squad, if Rob McKenzie's there, he would often be, you know, he'd have a very kind of tough criteria, I think, and there were times when he would make it very clear to the manager at the club that, no, this player doesn't fit your system, or he has different qualities to what you want, or he has certain drawbacks to him that are not going to mesh within your team. And yeah, there were a couple of agents that said that, and actually I read a little interview he did where he said similar, that he kind of got a bit of a reputation for that, of being someone that knocked down transfers because he felt that they weren't right, and often it would seem to be that he was proved to be right. They wouldn't go on to be... It's difficult though, isn't it? Because as we know very well at Tottenham, certain players fit certain managers and certain clubs. But he's very discerning, I think is the best way to put it. He very much looks at his data, analyses it, and also goes to see players with his own eyes. So he knows very well what works and what won't, and that's going to be a big thing because Postecoglou will very much make it clear exactly what kind of players he wants and what he doesn't want, and then McKenzie and Lang will go out and make that happen, and they'll know exactly who doesn't fit that Postecoglou way. He actually had quite a good relationship with Nigel Pearson. He trusted McKenzie, along with Walsh, of course. And actually, McKenzie went to work with Pearson at the Belgian side, Leuven. He modernised their scouting department with his data methods across 3 years and helped them gain promotion in the top flight in 2020. So, look, it's all going to hopefully benefit Postecoglou. It's going to give him more options and give him a wider range of players that he can look at. He's always said this himself. Every player at a certain level is a good player. It's about those little kind of differentials that make all the difference to whether they're a Postecoglou player or not. I asked him about Lang and McKenzie. He actually officially confirmed McKenzie in his answer to me, which the club hadn't actually done. We just knew it was happening. And I've got his quotes here. What did he say back to me? Because he actually said something else interesting about the January window. He said, I've caught up with Johan. Nothing too formal. I don't have the attention span for long meetings, mate, so it tends to be just casual chats with people. It's the best way to get my point across if I need to say something. The good thing is he's in the building now, so he's interacting with all the right people. The bit with me is the easy bit. It's about setting up the procedures and the structures to make sure he gets the department working the way he wants to get the right outcomes. As you said, Rob joining will help that. It's important that they come in now. The January window, like for every club, is an important one. My view on the January one is that if you can get your business done early in the window, it certainly is more helpful because you leave it until the end of January, and sometimes what you try to gain, you've missed that opportunity by waiting a whole month. That's sometimes out of your control. So having him in is good. I'm sure we'll have a lot of discussions between now and then. I'm looking forward to working with him. I do wonder whether the bit when he started to talk about, we want to get players in early in the transfer window, whether you could just imagine someone higher up in the press conference would have gone, no, to try and stop him saying it. Because I can't imagine that probably went down well at Spurs, because it does put the pressure on them to do exactly that. And it is something that in the summer transfer windows, I think they've kind of got their head around and they're doing it much better. Yes, they'll make the odd late transfer, but on the whole, they're getting their transfer stuff done early with a lot of the main buys. And shock horror, that's why you're seeing Spurs starting this season really well. And they did the same last season. They started quite well because they were getting people through the doors, early doors. But maybe in January, that's something there's less of. Maybe they wait around for opportunity. It was always described, isn't it, a January window as one of opportunity. And I think Spurs do wait to see what's going to happen. Whereas maybe with Postecoglou's urging, this might be a window again where they get their plans in place early and try to make the move. It is more difficult in January. It is. Despite whatever we kind of feel as journalists or fans, the January window is more difficult. Teams are more reluctant to let go of their players. They have different objectives. Objectives change over the course of a season. They get more desperate. They don't want to let people go, or the value of players goes up because of that, because of a little bump in form. It can be anything. So the January window is more difficult. However, if you do the proper planning and pick the right people, get the contact started with the clubs, then it should, like I say, best laid plans should get things up and running. Sorry, I was just keeping a very quick eye on how the under-21s are doing, because I'm missing that one. Really, that's the one benefit of Spurs play for me, is that a lot of the away academy games I've been able to watch, which I was missing last season. So good stuff from Postecoglou on that. because obviously Postecoglou in the summer, you'd have heard me say in these videos and read what I'd written about how obviously with Paratici marginalised into his more of a consultancy role, Postecoglou was very much having to drive the recruitment himself, in part helped by Leonardo Gabbanini as a chief scout, who kind of was stepping into this quasi half chief scout, half almost a director of football, but not role, alongside Postecoglou, with Paratici consulting again. And it ended up kind of in this mishmash of Postecoglou very much the centre of things, but all these differing opinions coming in. So you had Paratici's opinion, you had Gabbanini's opinion, you probably had Levy's opinion, I'd imagine, as well, based on whatever advice he was getting from various people. I mean, Paratici, we know he was a big fan of Vicario, Johnson and Maddison, and obviously they all came through the door. But there's also the agencies. You've heard me speak about CAA Base before, who have got a strong influence at Spurs because of the many players they've got. Maddison, Porro, Son, Richarlison, Sarr, young players like Devine, Scarlett, maybe Donington, I think, as well. Maybe even Santiago. Iago Santiago might be as well. And the head of football, one of the head of footballs at Base, is Frank Trimboli, who Postecoglou is a long-time friend of, and he's his agent. Postecoglou is part of Base as well. So obviously they're going to have advice and help and aid they're going to give him, and obviously certain players that they might want to point him towards. Then you had another agency, I think, that's growing a little bit in their connections with Spurs, is USG, which is Unique Sports Group. They got a big kind of deal through at Spurs at last moment, which is Brennan Johnson. He's one of their guys. I think they've also got Ryan Sessegnon, Troy Parrott. I feel like there's someone else I'm forgetting as well. And actually, interestingly, in the last week, maybe two, they've brought in as their new director of football of their agency, Steve Hitchin, who you'll know was Spurs technical performance director before. And obviously we'll have a good relationship still with many people at the club, and probably including Daniel Levy. So, yeah, like I said, so many different inputs there and differing voices. You've got Paratici, you've got Gabbanini, you've got different agencies, you've probably got Levy as well. And Postecoglou in the middle of it all, very much, at least you know he's very secure and straight in what he wants and is not going to be shaken from that. So in essence, all these voices, maybe we're just offering differing choices for him to then look at and whittle down. But I guess the point now of, I should stress, obviously Gabbanini's left. I think the feeling with Gabbanini is that he felt ready to become a director of football. Spurs didn't particularly agree with that, the view, in terms of maybe for them. May well, and actually there's a good interview he did with The Athletic this week where I think he touched upon that himself and has said maybe he does need to go off to a slightly lower level and build his way back up as a director of football, because he's someone that's been more at the chief scout. I think it's the Pozzo family. He's been working with Udinese and Watford before he came to Spurs. So it'll be interesting to see whether he, emerges as a force in the years to come as a director of football. But not the right time at Spurs, and that's why we had Lang and McKenzie have come in. And I guess their job will be to cut through that noise for Postecoglou of all those differing voices and present him with shorter lists of players for him then to look at and decide exactly who he wants, speak to, and all of that. It should work. I'd be intrigued to see what role, if any, Paratici does have going forward, because, look, like I said, he is one of the best in the world at kind of facilitating deals, I guess is the way to put it. He's still got, almost 2 years left of his, if not maybe under, of his ban. He is still banned from certain or most of the aspects that are required of a director of football, but he can work on a consultancy basis. But I would think that if I'm Lang especially, I want to work on my own. I don't want the kind of other voices coming in, and it'll be interesting to see whether that causes any dynamic issues, whether if Paratici is still consulting to Levy, whether is that going over the head of Lang, who's looking to make his mark at the club. It'll be intriguing to see kind of how that works and he's still around. He's still a presence at matches. We still see him at games, so he's still kind of involved in some capacity. But I wonder now whether... I know there's this kind of thing now, he's become fashionable, Paratici, because a lot of his signings have really kind of sprung to the fore, I guess, in doing well. I think critics of Paratici would say, yeah, but all of those players were signed for a very different manager who didn't play them, and now they happen to be working for a completely different manager with a different style to the one he signed them for. So the likes of Bissouma and Sarr, obviously, are now wonderful players under Postecoglou, whereas under Conte, they weren't really the players for him. And even Pedro Porro, you could argue, is actually fitting Postecoglou better than he did Conte. And obviously Udogie, bit of a different one because he went away on loan, but he has come in and proved to be a perfect signing for the Postecoglou system. And Romero, probably even better player now under Postecoglou than he was under Conte. Paratici may well say, hey, I'll bring in talent. They're going to work under any manager, maybe, but they weren't under Conte. So yeah, I know it's fashionable right now to think Paratici is the greatest thing, and there's no denying he does certainly have an ability to acquire talent, let's put it that way. I'm not entirely certain still about his ability to offload players. That's still something that I don't think he ever really improved at Tottenham. But yeah, just intrigued to see where his place is in it all and how it works going forward. Because you can't have too many cooks in the kitchen. You just can't, especially with someone as clear in their views and ideas as Postecoglou. It's just going to cause mayhem around him when he doesn't need it. I think I said this probably before, but now is the time to build everything that Postecoglou needs, not for anyone else to push their own individual agendas, and whether that means members of the staff, recruitment staff, whether that means agents, whatever that means, it's got to all be about Postecoglou now, and then just supplying him with the very best tools to do his job, I guess. But yeah, no, it's interesting to see what they do, and it'd be nice to hear from Lang as well, especially. It was something that Paratici was meant to do. We only got the odd window wrap or whatever it was, including the very bizarre one, just as he was about to be banned. Was it banned or his appeal rejected? I can't remember which it was. But yeah, it'd be good to hear from Lang now on a more consistent basis. Or either him or Munn, I guess. And yeah, I found some quotes from McKenzie when I was looking up, because the other thing about him is he's someone that will bring exhaustive detail to transfer dealings and scouting and everything, and that's Postecoglou. Postecoglou's a bit of an obsessive as well when it comes to football, so he'll love all of that. I found an interview he did, it was almost 10 years ago with Sky Sports. It was like a series of interviews, and he was talking about his style of technical scouting. And he said, one of the big selling points for technical scouting is efficiency and accuracy. We're not going to just watch a player in Italy or Germany on the hoof. We go through this process for every player, and if he doesn't tick enough boxes, then we don't go. Someone else may buy him, but based on the way we operate, we wouldn't go and even take a look. I think my job is about trying to minimise risk. If you're able to analyse how the player is performing in the competition that you're about to go into, then the risk is far more minimised because you know what he can do at that level. With other players, it's a bit of an unknown quantity, really. So, yeah, minimising risk is a big thing, obviously, in scouting. It's never, ever going to be perfect. There's always going to be the odd one that kind of slips through the net, or you sign and doesn't quite work. But I guess efficiency, that is the whole kind of point of the likes of McKenzie. And yeah, it'll maybe save Spurs some money, I guess, in terms of not just going to scout every single player here, there and everywhere. The data, that's the beauty of the data-based system, although it does cost you money to buy the data. That's kind of where the costs do, but it must surely be less than what you spend on all the travel and things like that. Yeah, intrigued to see how that works, because let's be honest, some of those big transfer Spurs have made in recent years have not worked, including a certain Tanguy Ndombele, who is just, it's all going a bit wrong for him in Turkey as well. I think any dream of sending him there permanently, or them signing him permanently, looks like it's fading away. unless he has an incredible second half to the season. Yeah, I'm not going to get into the Tongi situation. That's one for another day. But it's not going well for him. Let's be honest. That's the way to look at it. So head to the press conference now, which started in a bit of an unexpected way for me, which completely threw me off. So I go up to the desk. Postecoglou walks in. As we always do, we walk up to the desk where he sat and we put our phones on it so that we can record it and then transcribe it afterwards. And looked up at me. And let's be honest, if I thought that Postecoglou would be completely unaware that not only had I popped to Australia for a couple of weeks, but that I had, let's say, steered my wife towards the Paran district where he grew up in the suburb of Melbourne, I would have been completely wrong. I don't ever expect to kind of people to know or notice me or anything like that. So I just assumed I'd slot straight back into the press conference and ask questions. And Postecoglou, it might even cross his mind like, oh, yeah, that bloke hasn't asked any questions in a little while. But no, he seems to be aware of everything, does Ange Postecoglou. So I put my phone on the desk, looks up at me and he goes, welcome back. And then he goes, big grin on his face, there's better places to take your missus, yeah? He says, you owe her big time, mate. Obviously referring to taking her to Paran rather than the beaches or whatever of Australia. So he was very well aware what I'd been up to. Although a little bit harsh on Paran. It's a very nice place. It's like, obviously it's not quite what it was when he was younger. It's kind of become this trendy, almost hipster type place with bars and restaurants and designer outlets. It's very nice. So Mrs. Gold was very happy to go there. And obviously, as you heard me say in the previous video, she got to go to Ramsay Street, so she was very happy anyway. But yeah, it made me chuckle because we were kind of chatting away, and then I think he suddenly realised, oh, we've got to start the press conference. And you suddenly see him go very serious. I was like, yeah, good. And he starts it. And he said something a little bit later to me as a bit of an aside while answering a question to someone else, which unfortunately I can't go into because it's part of one of the embargoed section. I think the stuff from it comes out Sunday night, 10:30 at Sunday night. But yeah, there was another element, something else he said to me, which actually kind of pretty makes it clear that not only did he know I was doing that, I think he read the feature as well, because it suggested that he was very aware that I also went to his high school and had been, or is the site of his former high school, and his glorious run as the manager as an 11-year-old of his high school football team. He was very aware that I knew all about that. But yeah, I can't really go into that too much, otherwise I'm kind of slightly spoiling what's to come on Sunday night. But that kind of really took me aback. I tried to be quite an unassuming bloke. So yeah, to suddenly know that the manager of the Premier League, I was taking the mickey out of my wife when I got back. I was saying, how does it feel to have a Premier League manager talking about you? He was actually talking about you. And that, I could have taken you to better places and I owe you one. And she found that hilarious. But it threw me off for the first couple of, because I'm taking notes at the start of a press conference. I was absolutely like, my brain was in a bit of a spin. Like, I had not expected to actually be noticed that I was even gone. It was quite funny. It was, he's a funny chap. He is. We've got I don't know if you can have a really great relationship with Postecoglou. I don't know if it works like that, but I don't know if he allows himself to get that close to journalists, because we've said a bit before what he's like with people and the lack of small talk and things like that. But I'd hope we're getting to a kind of a stage now of knowing each other where, I don't want to say mutual respect because that's cringy. Obviously, I respect what he's doing. I don't expect him to go respect me, but certainly I'd hope that he knows that I'm not trying to trip him up with my questions, and that my questions are a little bit different, maybe, especially pre-match ones, to what other people might ask. And I certainly feel like the answers I'm getting out of him, but to be fair, he does it for everyone. But they're long and really insightful and interesting answers. So, it's the start of a great friendship. It's not. It's not a start. We won't be hanging out probably anytime soon, but hopefully it leads to a decent working relationship. Let's put it that way. One of the other questions I asked him, I obviously asked him about the Johan Lang stuff. Also asked him about Pat Matasar, who he calls Pappy. But I'm certain from everyone that tells me in the club it's Pap. But you're never going to correct him, are you? Let's be honest. I wanted to know, because I've read some interviews that Sarr has done where he says he's not entirely sure whether he's going to end up as a number 6, a number 8 or a number 10 midfielder. Because obviously he's quite versatile and he kind of plays in all the different roles. So I thought, I'll ask Postecoglou, where do you think he's going to end up? It was a really good answer, actually. He said, the good thing is that he can run and play all three at once. I think with Pap, or Pappy as he calls him, when you consider his age, it's just his ability to embrace the challenge of playing in a midfield role, particularly for us when it's quite multifunctional in terms of what's needed from him. He has this great capacity. For him, it's a great strength to just run and provide energy in all different areas. I think just having him there helps, because sometimes he's a 6, sometimes he's an 8, sometimes he's a 10, sometimes he's a fullback, and he does all of that with ease. Which is not easy to do, because it does require some real energy and a really strong work ethic. I think as he gets more experienced, he'll refine some areas of his game. Sometimes his decision making is a little rushed, but geez, for where he's at in his career, what he's providing for us is enormous at the moment. So I like that. It was a really good answer. Essentially, he's all of the above, but as time goes on, he will refine himself to becoming one of those probably. And I don't know which way he's going to go. If I was to bet on any of them, I'd probably say the number 8 role, the box-to-box role, because I think he'll have to add more to his attacking side of his game to maybe become a number 10. But, he is chipping in with the odd goal and assist and pre-assist, as they call them as well this season. So who knows? But he's just so young and talented. He's superb. And the other thing I asked him was about Christian Romero, because if you weren't aware, Ange has been nominated for Manager of the Month again for 3rd month in a row. Personally, I think he should win it again, because he's the only one of the nominated managers to win every single game. I just have this feeling that maybe it will go to someone else, just to kind of, I guess, to slap Tottenham down. Don't get ahead of yourselves. And maybe the argument will be made, well, some of the opposition, the other managers were facing were better opposition or more higher tier opposition. I don't know. But for me, I think he deserves it. I do. If you've got a 100% record and you've beat everyone in front of you, you've done your job. You're the best manager there is that month. But it doesn't always work like that. But Romero has been nominated for Player of the Month. I feel he's probably got less of a chance of winning, because Player of the Month often will go on attacking players, and there's Sarr in there, I think scored 5 goals in October. So I have a feeling it's probably not going to go to Romero, but it is acknowledgement of a terrific month for him and Van der Ven. So I asked about him, and he said he's kind of just spoke in really good general terms about what's happened with Romero. He said, Kuti, I'm sure, was disappointed with the way his club football went last year, but he also ended up winning the World Cup. Since I've been here, I just think he's an outstanding defender. He's a really strong personality, and he has a real winner's mindset in everything he does. For us, I think there's great growth in our front third, but I think the way the defensive side of our game has come together, when you consider Vicario has just joined the club, Mickey has just joined the club, Destiny has just come across in his first year, and Pedro in his second year, but probably first year playing in that position. I think the one constant and the rock in there has been Romero, with the way he's taken on the responsibility of guiding the other guys around him so they look assured. I think they feel security having him beside them. I think he's a big part of why we've done so well defensively. Again, there's more to come from him. He wants to improve. He works so hard every day. You need it. He's a winner, and I can see that in him with the way he trains, the way he plays. So it helps from a cultural perspective in the squad as well. He certainly gives everything in training. Even today, I was watching one of the videos, and he launches into a tackle on Eric Dyer. Probably thankfully for Eric Dyer, he skips away from. But my goodness, he is a guy who leaves his mark. Whether it's training, he goes full throttle in all of it. And that's a winner's mentality. And I think allied with the extra responsibility he's got, allied with just a general maturing, I think, as a player, it's taken him in a terrific direction. And he feels that he's the senior player in that back line. He feels that he's the constant, the experienced one. He's a World Cup winner. And Postecoglou loves him, absolutely loves Romero. And Romero seems to be really kind of benefiting from that as well. We kind of sensed that even in the summer. There was a real shift for Romero in terms of he was really happy again. You could see he wasn't... I wouldn't go as far to say his relationship with Conte was bad or anything like that, because Conte would praise him as well. But you could kind of see that he knew things just weren't right maybe under Conte, and the split in the group that he spoke about when he did the interview out on the tour. Whereas straight away he kind of recognised what Postecoglou wanted and what he wanted from him. And his style of football absolutely fits Romero. Romero loves to have the ball on the floor. He loves to ping the passes around. He loves to be able to dribble and get up the pitch. He loves being almost like the first line of attack while in defence, and taking risks. It's all very much his game. So, it was another. Like I say, I got really good answers from him again. And he was also very good on Pochettino, I felt. He kind of struck the balance really nicely with Pochettino because, look, we know that there's going to be a lot of Spurs fans that are very upset that Pochettino went to Chelsea. We know that. And I understand the frustration. I think if I'm looking at it from his side, Spurs weren't coming back in for him. What was he meant to do? Just sit there and not take a top job if one came along? However, I also understand the idea of, but why Chelsea? Why Arsenal? Why Arsenal or Chelsea are the two that you would probably think, come on, surely you've got to swerve away from that. But then maybe that's the fan aspect and not looking at as a job. I guess maybe from my position, I think I said at the time, I was a little bit disappointed he went to Chelsea, of course, because I do feel like he would talk them up as one of the biggest rivals of the club that he loved and adored. But then the other side to me, I guess, is we talk about a working relationship. I had one of those with Postecoglou, Pochettino. They're too similar, their names, for like half a decade or so. So I kind of maybe understood it more as a job, another job for him. But I do understand the frustration, and I'm intrigued to see kind of how that manifests itself, if it does, on Monday night when he returns, and whether there is a cheer when he's first seen or whether there are boos. There's a part of me that thinks maybe, as always in life, it might be heightened on social media to what it actually is in the stadium. It may be that kind of people more appreciative of what he brought to the club. I'll tell you what, I'll read out what Postecoglou's view on it was, because it's a very good one. It kind of mirrors pretty much what my view is. He said, it's undoubted that he had an unbelievable impact on this football club. All of us in our roles, that is our ultimate goal and ambition, that whatever doors we go through, we make an impact. And he had an undeniable impact on this football club in his time here. He almost took the club to the ultimate summit of the Champions League. He got close in the league, so his work is unquestioned. Everyone I speak to around here, there are still people who worked with him. They can't speak highly enough of him as a person and as a manager. I doubt there will be anything but respect for Mauricio from anyone at this football club, supporters or people associated. But it doesn't mean he will get a guard of honour on Monday night, because we want to win. I don't think he would expect that, but his tenure here and the impact here is undeniable, and it will stand the test of time. Whenever people think of Mauricio and his time here as a Spurs manager, they will only look upon it with respect and fondness. And I'm kind of there, I think. And again, I know why people are frustrated. I know it's Chelsea and I know all of that. But I just feel that it would be very unfortunate to just scrub out what Pochettino did for Spurs. He massively overachieved with Spurs, with what he had at a time when the club was so focused on the stadium. They absolutely lucked out with getting Postecoglou in at that time. You know, the guy had Spurs challenging for the title in 2 years, 2 of the seasons. He had them in the top 3 for 3 years in a row, top 4 for 4 years in a row. Got them to their first ever Champions League final, and all through building a squad and giving everyone a hope and a connection with the club that we hadn't had in years. So the fact that he is now the Chelsea manager, it's unfortunate, but I don't think that should detract from everything he did for the club. And And yeah, it would be a massive shame, I think, if there were boos for him. And I'm sure there might be the odd one, but I would hope that they'll, it's the first time back, that there'll be that little bit of respect for him. And look, Spurs are in a good place right now. That's the thing as well. They've got a manager in Postecoglou, a head coach, who is doing wonderful things, and you can see the way he wants to take the club, and it's very exciting. So maybe, is there really the need to be that bitter and angry at Pochettino? Because we're having fun. We're in a good place right now. It's one of those where maybe it was worded, the question to the one I just asked, said the answer to, was worded really interestingly in the press conference. It was something along the lines of, when you don't want to really see your ex, especially with someone that you hate. It was something along those lines. And Postecoglou really liked that. It made him chuckle, and he kept referring back to it in future answers. And it is kind of like that. No one wants to see their ex, especially on the arm of someone they hate. But in this instance, that ex did some wonderful things for us. I'm trying to think of a way to do it. It's all a bit weird. It's a bit like me calling Bentancur daddy last week. Very strange. Yeah, so we'll see. We'll see what happens with Pochettino. It'll be my first time seeing him in the flesh back. I haven't had any real indirect contact with him since, but nothing direct. I think Jesus Perez is banned as well, or he's certainly got a red card. But yeah, Pochettino's been talking about Spurs again, and today he was saying that he does believe they're title contenders, and he's really looking forward to coming back to Spurs. And you could kind of see, if you watch that clip, he's like, had to apologize. He's like, I'm sorry, but I am really excited. And I think you could kind of tell he was slightly betraying his duty to the Chelsea fans to not show his Spurs love, I think, there. Honestly, it's worth watching back some of the little things he said about Spurs today. But yeah, it was interesting. Another thing that Postecoglou was asked was whether he would like £1 billion to spend like the Chelsea managers have had. And he didn't quite go. If you expected him to just say yes, he didn't. He said, not necessarily. I've always said I've never felt it's about just spending money. That's been proved time and time again. Yeah, look, if you get it all right, then you've got a pretty strong case. But there's always a limit to every team. You can't have 24 world-class players. That will never work. It doesn't work. It's been proven. It's about having a squad that's balanced. Guys that are committed to a cause. Guys that maybe aren't going to play every game, but every time they play, they're going to make a huge impact for you because they buy into what you're trying to build. Just spending endless money to get the best players has been proven time and time again is not the answer. The answer is to get the right chemistry in your team, in your squad, to have 24 players committed to one cause. I don't think you can do that if you get just the 24 best players in the world. That's a headache I definitely don't want. So yeah, I thought it was a really good answer, and it's true. We often see kind of people kind of almost playing FIFA or Football Manager. Spurs 2-0 up in the under-21s. Lancashire scored one, and who's the other one? Santiago. Santiago and Donnelly both nominated again for Player of the Month in Premier League 2, so that's only going to help Santiago. Sorry. By the time this comes out, it's absolutely nonsensical me giving updates, but it excited me when I saw it, if that's the word. Where was I? So yeah, it's really interesting about the whole thing about the I think fans and everyone just we all want to see the best squad in the world ever, but having just a squad of Galacticos doesn't really always work. You've got to have those worker bees, the water carriers, as Deschamps was called. It's about building a squad with all the different components rather than just one that's, a gleaming, shining Ferrari engine kind of thing. It's got to be a bit of everything. So yeah, I thought that's a really good answer. Let's be honest, his answers are always so well thought out. He's a very clever chap, is Ange Postecoglou, and very thoughtful chap as well. He hasn't had one misstep yet. It will come, because like me talking in these videos, you talk so much, you're going to end up saying something that isn't right, or is judged not to be right by time, or or he's changed the aspect of it because of time or whatever. So he'll say something. I mean, I guess you could argue his the team selection for the Fulham game in the Carabao Cup was probably one of his missteps. But even speaking about that, he kind of tried to justify it, I suppose. What else in the press conference? Injury news, obviously, ahead of the Chelsea game. I'll give you exactly what he said. It's easier. Obviously, it's a bit unusual because we've still got a few days, but at this stage from last week, everyone got through the game okay. Benny Davies, sounds like a jazz performer, who came off at half-time. He still has a bit of an ankle problem and hasn't trained with the team yet, so he's touch and go. Destiny is still working his way through it. We haven't ruled him out of the Chelsea game yet. Obviously, we've still got a few days up our sleeves. That's probably 50-50 at this stage as to whether he'll be available. Everyone else is okay, apart from the long-term ones. Apart from Benny Davies, the jazz performer. With Destiny Doggy, yeah, it's an interesting one, that. It is enough. You know, there are a few days to come. If you're wondering why his press conference was on a Thursday when the match wasn't until the Monday, it's because today, Friday, they all had the day off. Just to kind of rest up, recover their bodies ahead of a weekend that is going to be obviously hard preparation in time for a big match against a team that will also be running and pressing and trying to get possession as well. Because, you know, Postecoglou training is relentless. So to have a little day off just ahead of it, it's so weird, the time frame of these games, you know, Friday and then not playing until the Monday of the following week after that. I mean, it gives them enough time to recharge their batteries, you'd hope, and it does give the likes of a Doggy more time than usual to be ready for the game. Look, if he doesn't play, it's only Emerson Royal, isn't it, that's going to play there. And then I guess if you're looking at your team selection, where else the other choice is, it's probably up front. It's where the Brennan Johnson comes in for me. For me, he does, I think, in terms of that's what I do. I think he'll have had another 8-9 days worth of being able to up his fitness. And I think you go with the attack. I think it's the same one that started against Arsenal. Go with Johnson, Son and Kulusevski. It's a lovely balance of creativity, it's a balance of pace, it's a balance of finishing with Sonny. I just feel there's so much to come from Johnson on that right, and I think you've got Richarlison then as an impact sub when you want to bring a bit of a different threat. And also I think if you've got Emerson there, who's probably going to be more defensive and not going to go wide, especially because obviously it's not his natural kind of side, the left-hand side, to have Johnson to be able to sprint up and down that line provides that outlet down there. And also, you know, maybe Richarlison would work back that little bit harder, maybe in a defensive point of view, or certainly is more used to working defensively in that aspect. Whereas with Emerson there, maybe sitting slightly further back, you maybe don't need that, which gives more latitude, I guess, to Johnson to do what he can do. Emerson probably can fit the number 10 role that the inverted fullbacks have to do. I'm sure he'll be fine with that. He's not the greatest attacker in the world, of course, but he's tidy enough on the ball to be able to provide an option in the centre as well. So, yeah, we'll see on a Doggy. I think if there's any chance he's going to be fit, they'll go for it. Obviously not to the extent of risking him, but certainly the width that he brings you and the balance down the left, I think. And bear in mind, he did play with Johnson in that game at the Emirates. So, yeah, I think you go everything you can. And if not, it's Emerson. And I don't think you really make changes elsewhere. I wouldn't. I think it's quite settled. And, yeah, obviously we've got Bentancur who'll probably be able to get that little bit more minutes this time after those, 10 or so minutes he got, 11 minutes or so with the added time. And obviously another, like I say, 8-9 days to train. So Bentancur is going to be in an even better position as well to get more time under his belt. So, yeah, plenty of options there. And that's it, really. I can't think of any other kind of way you'd go with the team. I don't think Højbjerg has played well, but I don't think you kind of usurp that Maddison, Bissouma and Sarr trio right now. I know there's been a little bit of concern, as there always is. People have been watching the training videos and haven't been able to see James Maddison. Oh, my stomach just rumbled. It's getting to dinner time. With Maddison, he does sometimes kind of doesn't do every session. Sometimes he has little kind of niggles and issues that maybe mean he doesn't. And what I would always say about training videos is you don't know when they were done. That might have been training videos from earlier in the week. And like I say, we've still got time. So, yeah, I've always been told don't read too much into training videos or photos. Certainly Spurs, and I'm sure other clubs do this, will sometimes deliberately leave people out of videos or photos in order to create that little bit more of the unknown for the opposition, I think, as well. So we'll see. It may well be that we end up finding out that something isn't quite right. But, yeah, no mention of Maddison at all by Postecoglou, which would... he doesn't strike me as a type that would just outright lie. I'm not about to say Christian Stellini's name. I'm not going to say he's an outright liar, but he would bend that truth when it came to injuries. And we haven't, I don't think, really had that thus far with Postecoglou. So, yeah, we'll see what the team is, but I'd imagine he'll go for Johnson. He really likes Johnson, and I think you could see the impact Johnson made against Palace as well. Probably deserves that shot, and it's a nice battle to have up there, I think, with people. Right, do a couple of questions that people put in there. Right, let's scroll down what we've got. Klinsman 1985 asks, what attributes would you prioritise in a new January centre-back? Another pacey left-sided player? I feel like Van der Ven's attributes are more unique, making him an even bigger loss than Romero, despite Romero being a better all-round player. I think they're both fantastic centre-backs. It's a difficult one. It's whether you're looking for the short-term or the long-term. You certainly need one more experienced body in there. If we're assuming that Dyer is going to leave next summer, probably not in January unless the most amazing deal for him and Spurs came up that would make him forego being a free agent and the extra money that comes with that next summer. You probably are looking for another left-sided player, or certainly a defender that is able to play on that left side. Ben Davies can fill in there, but it's not his natural ideal position. So I think the thing is, when you say attributes, they are the Postecoglou attributes. So it's going to be a player with a bit of pace, centre-back with a bit of pace that can get back for anything that goes over the top. It's got to be someone that's comfortable on the ball. It's got to be someone that's comfortable under pressure. It could be someone that's pretty decent in the air as well to mop out anything that can come over. And also someone that's happy kind of charging up the field and getting involved in attacking play as well. So whether they're left-sided or right-sided, they're going to be the same kind of prototype for the player. So yeah, that would be the attributes for that one. Brad1696 asks, can anyone see Ange changing the starting 11 to give us a three-man midfield which includes Sarr, Basuma and Bentancur, then with Maddison up front on the left, Son through the middle and Kulu on the right, or Johnson? Maybe in certain games. Bentancur I do feel is very good at threading little balls through as well. I just wonder whether you're wasting Maddison slightly by pushing him that far up the pitch. Maybe. It depends. Certain games, certain scenarios, maybe. Pete Gray 21 asks, given Lo Celso's lack of game time, are we likely to lose him in the January transfer window? And if we do, who else is likely to be a decent understudy for Maddison? We'll see where Lo Celso's at. He hasn't had a lot of game time. Some of that has been injury related. He does need to get more minutes under his belt, I feel. Especially if he is going to be the Maddison alternative. In terms of decent understudy, I'm going to look within the club and say Alfie Devine. Honestly, I've got such high hopes for Alfie Devine. He's having a terrific loan at Port Vale. He scored in back-to-back games. Scored at the weekend with a lovely kind of acrobatic finish, and the other night he scored with a bouncing drive from about 25 yards. He's absolutely smashing it, and this really could be the perfect loan move for him to really push on. Comes back next summer, and I think he's the really good alternative. One of those number 8 roles I think he'll be perfect for. I know he'll only be 19 now, but I still think, again, we look at the likes of Udogie and Sarr, and I think Devine will come into that category, and Postecoglou likes him. He told me that. So he didn't tell me, like, whisper it in my ear. I think he said it in one of the press conferences. So yeah, that's how I'd say. I'd say Devine as the backup. Fat Rob 1711, that was an unfortunate nickname, asks, how does someone like yourself, going into Spurs journalism from the lower leagues, accumulate all the sources you have effectively from scratch? It's just work. It's just years. It's time as well. You know, you start off kind of just trying to be more analytical in the way you write. You try to make an impression on people. You try to get to know people. I made a real point of not wanting to just cover first team games. I wanted to go to under 21 matches as well, especially, and also FA Youth Cup games when I could, because kind of getting to know that scene, getting to know those kind of games, you get to know people around the players, the young players, whether it be family, whether it be agents at games, and obviously those young players then develop into the first team players, and it's just about kind of, it's all of it. There's a bit of a snowball effect as well. I think the better the reputation you kind of gain for yourself, the more people will trust you. The more, when if you ring an agent, you know, or someone connected with a player, they might know who you are. They might know from speaking to other people that you're not someone that's going to stitch them up, and you're not going to just suddenly blurt out their name or write their name in something or just put them in an awkward position. So yeah, just all snowballs from there. I mean, I've been a journalist for a long, long time now. You know, I've been a journalist for 20 years. So I kind of know how to create contacts and look after them as well, so that I'm not going to burn any bridges. And in the football world, you know, I've still been doing sports journalism for a good 15 years as well. So I kind of built up some contacts that way, and then Spurs now for, wow, where are we at? Summer of 2016, I started covering Spurs. Oh my goodness, we're at the 7-year mark now. Over 7 years. God, that's flown by. That's mad. So yeah, that's what it is really. It's just trying to work hard, trying to build a reputation for yourself, and then just putting yourself out there. It's all about being proactive. So I always tell any young journalists that kind of ask, and young journalists that come into our company, that just be proactive, put yourself out there. Things don't come to you, you know, you don't fall into your lap, especially in journalism. Once in a while they might, but that's very more a fluky thing. You've really got to go out there and get stuff, and yeah, it's part of being a journalist really. You've got to, I don't want to say annoying, I guess you've got to be slightly annoying, you've got to be persistent, and yeah, just keep trying to dig away and see what you can find out. What else we got? The Donny Jones asks, is there one rule or technology you would take from another sport and add to football? If so, what would it be? Oh, do you know what? I think there's almost too much rules and technology right now. I guess more use of the Hawkeye kind of style of doing things, in terms of, I'd rather ditch the VAR over offsides and just have a system. You know, I know they were using a semi-automated one at the World Cup, but just have an offside system that as soon as like bing, like the referee gets the thing, straight away you know whether the player's offside or not. That I would prefer. So I guess that's taking that from tennis in a way, although I know it already exists in the goal line technology. There's not too much. I don't want to add any more. I think there's already enough rules and technology used in football. We're kind of getting away from the beautiful game, as it were. Crikey, as a throwback from the same person, Donny Jones. When Carlos Vinicius' loan ended, there was no social media thanks or farewell. Is this because he was close to staying at Spurs permanently, or down to the managerial search mess? I think it was just a loan that ended. He was kind of mentioned in the roundup. I don't really know. I don't know. I think I don't know. I must admit, that's never one that's really crossed my mind in the time since Cars finishes. Obviously, Premier League player, and he's proving he's a Premier League player. Lil Chrissy Vevo asks, what are your feelings and have you had any interactions with Fabrizio Romano? He seems a very nice guy. I've had interactions with him. Seems very pleasant every time we've chatted. He's a machine. He's a very different kind of style, I guess. It's like almost kind of created, I suppose, a brand. It's fair play to him. Like I said, every time we've ever spoken, it comes across as a very nice chap. So can only always judge people on how you find them, and my dealings with him has been very, very pleasant. What else we got? Adam Clive Music asks, was the noise in the summer around Nagelsmann and Slot a smokescreen, or have Spurs got lucky with a second choice again? I think they got lucky. Even Andrew's kind of essentially said that himself, that he kind of was last man standing. So yeah. While I will praise them for having him on their list, and he certainly was on their long list, they've once again very luckily picked the perfect choice in the end via various other circumstances. What else we got? Are the players now allowed to use ketchup? Asked the Wally Whale. I don't know. It will be down on the sports science staff and the nutritionists. I don't know. People get a bit obsessed with the whole ketchup thing, I think. But I can certainly ask around. I can. Steve Destiny 74 says, when do we stop saying it's very early days? I guess that's about title talk. Do you know what? Get through these next 6 games. That's what I'm going to give it. The next 6 games are really... Santiago's been forced off. I hope he's not. That's not a bad one. What was I talking about? Yes. These next 6 games, obviously, you've got the likes of Chelsea in there as well. You've got Villa. You've got Wolves away is a difficult one. There's West Ham in there. Man City, of course. Let's have a look. I feel like there's another one as well. There's another biggie. The other one I'm thinking of is Newcastle, of course. Newcastle at home's after West Ham. So I think if they get through these 6 games and they're still right up there amongst it all, I think maybe we can start to get a little bit excited about it. But there's some big games in those 6 matches, so let's see where it goes. Faulkner Michael 5472 asks, how is Indy doing, and who looked after him during her Australian trip? Indy is doing fine. He's an absolute nutcase, and he always has been. He's a very overexcitable cockapoo. Honestly, you can go out the door, come back in, like literally go and get something from your car, and you'll come back in, and it's like you've left him for a year. He just goes bananas. But he's good fun. Who looks after him? My oldest daughter. She had to work, so it was just my wife and I went on the trip. So she was here with Indy the whole time. She works from home most of the time, which is very helpful as well. What else we got here? Daniel Marada, 606 asks, hello from Texas. Do you think Spurs' schedule thus far, although I know we've faced a few of the big 6, has been easier? If so, do you think this will help us gel, or will we do a wake-up call when we face other contenders in the top half of the table? No, I think you've said it yourself there. They've faced a few of the big 6. I mean, yeah, Man U obviously have been a bit of a basket case in recent weeks, but still, Man U, Arsenal, Liverpool in there. Yeah, and obviously Chelsea coming up as well. I think Man City is going to be a massive test, and so is Newcastle. No, I don't think so. I think they've just benefited, from the early transfer work. A really great team spirit. Players buying in very quickly. Obviously, Liverpool had a couple of things go their way in terms of the VAR, or one thing mainly. No, I wouldn't say it's particularly easier. I think pretty much all you add in is that they haven't played Man City. That's probably the main one that other teams maybe have faced and they haven't yet. So no, I don't think so. I think it all evens up anyway. Kimchi B asks, with Ange making the dressing room the players' space and discotheque, do we know how it's working with halftime talks? Does he have to be invited in by the senior players? To be fair, he's talking about the dressing room at the training ground at Hotspur Way. Not the training ground not the dressing room at the stadium. That's very much all of their domain. But no, the dressing room is he's talking about the training ground one at Hotspur Way. I'm sure he won't spend a lot of time in the dressing room at the stadium. That will be very much the points to make his statements and the things that he has to say. But on the whole, he probably will leave Ryan Mason, Matthew Wells, Mile Jedinak and Rob Birch to be kind of more in there. And sorry, Chris Davies, of course, is assistant as well. But yeah, he's more referring to the training ground one. What else we got? I'm going to do a couple more because I don't want to keep you on too long on your Friday evening or Saturday or whenever you're watching this. That's not really a question. David Grove asks, do you know if there's any plans for the under-21s to play at the stadium in the near future? They normally end up playing one game, don't they? At some point in the season. It's normally towards the end. Don't know, it's working for him well at the Lamex at Stevenage. It's a nice ground. And they do seem quite settled there. I think it is maybe a requirement to play one. I can't remember. But yeah, I know what you mean. They're playing some really good football. And obviously they lost in midweek at earlier in the week at Peterborough. But in terms of other than that, it'll be can you say 11 in a row if you're not including the Peterborough? I'm going to. So yeah, I know what you mean. It would be good to maybe bring them to a wider audience in the stadium, but I'd imagine it'll probably still just be the one this season. What else we got? Mark Spurs asks, do we need to sell players to bring new players into the club in January? What are the numbers looking like? Certainly not in defence. They could bring in someone there because they let Davinson Sanchez go. I think foreign player-wise, they're all right. Because of those Sanchez and Ndombele going late on after the window had closed, I think they'll be fine. You know, obviously we don't know what's going to happen with him. Perisic. Spurs saying he's out for the season, but then he's thinking he's going to come back just before the end of the season. And with that has come talk about maybe him going to Hajduk Split in January. So that might be another foreign player that's off the books. You'd imagine Hugo Lloris has to go in January for his own career. So I think naturally you're going to have players like that go out there. And they're big earning players as well, Perisic and Lloris as well. So I wouldn't say you'd need too much else. The only other prospective ones is just players, like we said earlier, that need game time and asked to leave. And there's an alternative on the market that they could bring in. So that might be, I don't know, maybe Oliver Skipp wants to just get some game time in the second half of the season if he feels it's not coming to him, and just go to maybe another Premier League team or a team abroad just for the last 4 or 5 months or so, just to get football under his belt, and you bring someone in. Or maybe Højbjerg gets an offer that's too good for him in the club to refuse. Although with Basuma and Sarr going away to the Africa Cup of Nations, you've got Sonny going to the Asian Cup as well. You probably don't want to lose any key players in the summer. Like Brian Hill, maybe, wants to go and get game time if he's not getting it, and there's an alternative on the market they could bring in. That's the scenario maybe where you do see outs and ins, as it were. What else we got? Michael Harvey also asks, have you heard who will be our chief scout? Yes, because we know. We know it is. It's Rob McKenzie. What else we got? Robert Villegas Vincent 404 asks, who on the youth side do you think is ready for a shot at the first team on the defensive side of things? Alfie Dorrington for me. Alfie Dorrington has impressed me every time I watched him. I'll be perfectly honest. In the under-21s games I've watched where he's been alongside Ashley Phillips, he's probably impressed me more than Ashley Phillips. I think Ashley Phillips is going to be a terrific defender, and he has that little bit more experience because he's played in the Championship 8 times, I think it was, with Blackburn. I think it was 8 times. But Alfie Dorrington is a hell of a centre-back. And I think you'll see him either fast-tracked with a bit of a loan, or you'll see him involved more from next season with the first team because, he's a terrific talent. And he also asked a non-Spurs question. Do you watch any of the Disney Plus MCU programming? And if so, have you checked out Loki? Curious on your take. I love Loki. It's really good. Very good indeed. And yes, I do. I'm a bit of a nerd in that respect. A bit of a geek in. I've watched all the Disney Plus MCU stuff. And one show I love, which has nothing to do with Disney. It is on Disney Plus, but it's not MCU, is What We Do in the Shadows. I love that show. Matt Berry is just incredible, and so many, all the cast are incredible. They're all spot on. Just working my way through the latest series of that. I love it. I've loved it for a few years. I love the original movie, Taika Waititi. Brilliant show. Sorry, digressing there. What else we got? Maharayan Pendragon asks, being desperate to ask this, are we still using Hugo Boss as our official dresser? Because I don't see the swanky suits anymore, nor the black t-shirts, at least not on Ange Postecoglou. I don't know. You've got me. I don't know. I'm trying to think if I've even seen the Boss branding around the stadium. I don't know. I was not expecting that question. I'll ask. I hope it remind me of it, and I'll look it up and get back to you. Wow. Chris Spurs asks, I've just started watching The Punisher, another great show. He's going to be in the new Daredevil series as well, which I think is really good and reminds me of Romero. So we also have Sonny as Spider-Man, Mickey the Flash, that's good, Vic as Venom. Which other players would you relate to superheroes and why? Oh my goodness, that's a tough one. This is where I literally forget all superheroes. That is a really difficult one. I don't know. I'm going to go away and think about that one. That's the kind of one I'm not going to do any justice, if you'll pardon the pun, if I just kind of come out with anything there. I'm going to do one more before I head off. The Line Drive asks, do you feel a striker in January is critical? Do you see Spurs entering a buyer's market for a striker? Who do you see them targeting? Personally, I think Tony fits what Spurs do perfectly. I agree in terms of I do think Tony fits what they do perfectly and what Postecoglou's system is. I just think the value it's just going to be ridiculous. I think he's based now as well. But I think it's just going to be such a ridiculous figure for him. And I think there's going to be so many clubs in there. I can imagine Spurs kind of veering away from that, which would be a shame. But I think with Sonny going, a lot will depend on Velise. If Velise has a real breakout moment in the next couple of weeks, gets a chance, scores a goal and manages to go on a little bit of a run of development, then maybe they think, okay, well, we've got him and Richarlison. Johnson can play up there. Maybe we think with the three of those, we can cover Sonny's absence for a little while. And with obviously Sonny back, then you've got maybe the 4 players that can play centrally until the end of the season. And then you look at it again in the summer. But personally, I'd like to see them maybe go for an attacker that can play across the front three, another Johnson type as well. Maybe if Brian Hill is to move on, I just wonder there whether they need one more option because that's the one area of the pitch that still hasn't fully clicked yet. And I would add a little bit more firepower myself in January, but maybe I'm just being greedy. We'll see. I think we'll stop there. I think that's I've taken up enough of your time. And and it gives plenty for the people to kind of chew over ahead of the Chelsea game, which is going to be a biggie. I'll be there on Monday night, back at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I think the first time maybe since the Liverpool game. It's been a while, because obviously I've been away. Really looking forward to getting back there. I hope there's a terrific noise. I hope it's a noise that really pushes on the Spurs players and they get a big derby win, because that'll be the real kind of momentum pusher, I think, for this little run, like I say, of 6 games to come up. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see all the little jewels on the pitch. And obviously, Postecoglou up against Pochettino. It's going to be a biggie in itself. So, and Gareth Bale coming back at half-time as a guest. Coitie's going to talk to him on the pitch, I think. Yeah, could be a real occasion. And hopefully, at that point, you've got Arsenal, Liverpool and City all playing beforehand, all potentially could go above Spurs. So Spurs may be in the position, and I think you'd imagine certainly City will win their game. I think they're at home at Bournemouth, against Bournemouth. I think Arsenal away at Newcastle, Liverpool maybe away at Luton. I can't remember what their game is. It'll be interesting to see how now Spurs deal with that aspect of it, of kind of being the team that plays last rather than the team that plays first. Yeah, big night in N17, and hopefully we'll have a very positive video to talk about probably Tuesday night. I'd imagine I'll get around to doing that. So hopefully a positive one. That would be great. Right, I'm going to head off now. Enjoy your weekend. Hope you have a great one, and I hope we all have a fantastic Monday night, and I shall catch you next week. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.